Well, good evening and welcome to Auto Arcadia. I'm one of the hosts, Colin Wood, and with me is,
Thomas Hope.
funnily enough, the other host.
Yeah.
So, Tom, tonight we're going to be looking at what makes a good driver's car. And we're going to be looking at chassis and dynamics, the kind of foundation for greatness. So, what is it?
Yeah, I do. Also, one of those parts of the driving experience that can be kind of hard to articulate and hard to point to exactly what you mean.
Yes, this is very true. For some cars shouldn't actually make a great driver's car, but they do. It's just there's something about it, like a Lancia Stratos, for example. The way you sit at a big obscure angle in the car and your feet are pointing in the opposite direction to your upper torso. It shouldn't work, but they're great fun. Yeah, so I mean, really, body and chassis, it sets the way for dynamics. Is ideal an engine at the front and an LSD in the back? Or do we really need to have the engine in the middle? We're going to have to dive in and see.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I kind of intuitively know what I like from driving a car, but I would struggle to fully articulate, exactly why, like what parts, mechanically and what setups that I kind of feel are best. I would really struggle to articulate that, but I would be able to kind of know what feels kind of good.
Yeah. And I think that might actually be kind of the key to this discussion, because I think what you're going to find is there's certain suspension setups and certain chassis qualities that really do lend themselves to feeling good. And also they build into the character of a car quite a lot. Really, this is for me, this is the foundation of a driver's car, is a good chassis, and that can mean a great many different things when you're talking about a driver's car.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the building block of the car.
Yeah, because I mean, for example, like everyone says, front engine rear wheel drive, that's king of the tree. BMW, their slogan is the ultimate driving machine, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, Lotus Elan, MX5, E30 BMW, F83 M2. I've probably got the chassis code wrong, and somebody's going to call me a penis in the comments, but it'll be fine. Honda S2000, Honda Mazda RX-8, for example, all very, very fine handling cars.
Also, there's the MX-5.
Yes, that's true. I mean, I said the Lotus Elan. That's essentially all it is.
Fair.
But interestingly on that, the two I snuck in at the end there, like the Honda, the S2000 and the RX-8, they're technically mid-engined as well.
Is that because the motor is behind the front axle?
Yes, it is. And this is kind of what I mean by, like, everyone says front rears, like the daddy, but like they're really front midship rear.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like mid-engined, like say a Ferrari Enzo would be, but they are still mid-engined, and you can tell, like the RX-8, for example. I owned one, and the front end of them is so light and darty, not in the same way as an MR2 is, for example, but they're quite delicate.
Yeah, a lot of empty space up front.
Oh yeah, and it pays dividends to the driving experience, really. But I mean, this is one I'm actually quite keen on what you think about, because you have had an MR2.
Yes.
And you also have quite possibly one of the finest driving BMWs this side of an M2, and one of the finest driving cars this side of a Porsche Cayman, for realistic levels of money that are attainable for most folk. So I'd quite like to hear what you think about, like, front rear versus mid-engined.
I think I prefer front, a kind of front mounted engine rear wheel drive setup over mid engined, but I did really like the MR2. I did really, really like that. It did feel it felt so alike a go-kart, more than any other car I've ever driven. it may have been also, it may have felt a little bit like a go-kart because it was quite rough and it was quite jarring over bumps and stuff. Like it felt like it was made out of bits of metal bolted together, to be fair. But it just, you could point it wherever you wanted and it would follow really, really quickly.
Yeah. So in terms of feel, did you prefer the MR2?
Yeah, I think I probably did actually.
Hmm.
Maybe I don't like front rear. Maybe I'm a mid-engine kind of guy.
Well, that's what we're here to find out.
Yeah, I need to discover. I mean, I have looked at a lot of mid-engine cars, a fair bit.
Yeah, it's fairly easy to though, because there's like all the Exotica is mid-engined, well, apart from the 911, which is yeah. But no.
Do you know what car I really like? I think it was mid-engined. Was the Lotus Esprit?
Yeah.
The 2000s Lotus Esprit, where they kind of like, they kind of modernized the old design. I really like that. I'm pretty sure that's mid-engined.
Yeah, it is.
I think I like the shape of cars that are mid-engined because it forces particular kind of design, kind of shapes and choices and cues, and I think I like them overall.
I have to side with you there because see, having a vent on the waist, like your Lotuses and your MR2s and all your Ferraris, they've all got that the inlet vents on the rear quarter, and I think that just proportions a car so well because you essentially end up creating hips on a vehicle, and they just look amazing. There's something about the shape and the profile that you end up with that is really cool.
Absolutely, I agree. I agree. As long as they are maybe a bit more they function with some form, not just like bolted on for looks.
Yeah, and I mean as well, we touched a little bit on this in the Formula One episodes, but some of the most beautiful cars ever made are mid-engined rear-wheel drive, like the Birdcage Alfa Romeo and the P330 Ferrari and that sort of thing, like the early Formula One stuff.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I do like it as a layout. I totally get why car manufacturers don't really make them very often because they do make the car kind of like much tighter package. Like they're more expensive to produce.
Yeah, and they're less practical, and typically, I think people would feel quite. I think people typically feel a bit threatened by them, or
What do you mean by threatened?
intimidated would be a better word. Like, there's a reason why the vast majority of cars are now front wheel drive.
Yeah, yeah,
Admittedly, it started off as a packaging thing. And it was the absolute ruination of all that is good and holy about cars as well. Not that I have a particularly strong opinion on this. But yeah, no, so it started off essentially as a cost cutting exercise because you could build a sub-assembly and then build a whole car and then just plop a sub-assembly in from underneath. And it's easier to build, it's easier to design. By the time you get the tooling and everything, it's actually easier across the range because you can design a car and then use similar subframes. Like, so it makes it easier to share a lot of parts as well, realistically.
absolutely.
Instead of just sharing a subframe, you're now sharing a subframe and a transaxle and drive shafts and hubs and uprights across several different vehicles in your model range.
Absolutely. It can be a case of like just the whole subframe and engine and running gear and everything can just be almost interchangeable.
Yeah. So that's really where Formula One. Fuck, what am I talking about? Use your words, you fucking idiot. That's really where front-engined front-wheel drive came from, and it kind of all started with the Leyland Mini. Well, the Mini was the first big, like, knock it out the park front-wheel drive car, really. The one that really got it accepted. And yeah, I mean the driving dynamics of most front-wheel drive cars are horrible. You understeer lots.
They can be really good fun, but they when you push them harder and harder and harder, they'll just understeer.
Yeah, I mean the honourable mention to the Leyland Mini, like nobody's going to say they're not fun to drive. I used to own one. They are fucking really fun to drive, but they're also a bit of a nightmare to live with, in my opinion. And then Honda DC2 Type R, really, that and the DC5, two of the finest front engine, front drive, inverted quotes, air quotes, drivers' cars to exist, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Civics just don't, or well, Hondas in general just don't really excite me too much.
No, see, the thing is as well, see if it was in a different package, I would love it. High RPM, highly strung, relatively high output for relatively low displacement as road cars go. Like, it's everything I would like. It's just everything's in the wrong end of the car, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a shame because they're beautifully reliable.
People love them, man. Like, the people who, Civic people are properly diehard.
Yeah, but they're also Civic people. I mean, it's a good thing Fiesta ST people exist. Otherwise, I would hate the Civic people instead.
Civic people have kind of disappeared. There's not, well, certainly from what I've seen, there's not really that many.
Yeah.
Civics are less common.
It was when the EP3 was at its height, you'd have like just Honda people, and that's the only way I can describe them. And it's like, I used to work with a guy who was an absolute diehard Honda guy, and he got an import Civic that had like 200 brake horse, admittedly in a car that weighed about 900 kilograms. But then he rocked up to work one day saying, Audi RS4 absolutely smashed it. We're like, aye, because the Audi RS4 was in sixth gear at 50 mile an hour and you were flat out in third. Like, my Renault could overtake a Ferrari Enzo if a Ferrari was doing 70 and I was doing 80. It's not quite
absolutely.
the same. And it's that attitude I find really hard to get over them. And also, they seem to be absolutely diehard set on them being the finest drivers' cars on the planet, which just isn't true.
Yeah. I like them. I think they're good, but I don't want one. Absolutely don't want one.
I mean, I do have to say this on this. I'm about to just kill the front engine, front wheel drive discussion off totally, but I have to say, like, the kind of E-case Civics and before then had like dual wishbone front suspension and true multi-link rear suspension, which is like, that's the same setup as most GT3 race cars run.
Yeah.
They had a serious bit of suspension setup, and then they brought out the EP3, and everyone was like, oh, it's amazing. And then they actually, when the FN2 came out and everyone said it was dog shit, I actually drove pretty much all of the Hondas all back to back at the time because I worked for Honda, funnily enough. And legitimately, an FN2 is a far better road car than an EP3 ever will be.
Was it just a little bit more compliant?
It was more compliant. It was just better, man. Like, I genuinely don't get why everyone raves about the EP3. But anyway, man, this is going to be a controversial episode. I've went after Fiesta ST guys and Honda guys and the classic British guys, and it's not even 10 minutes into the recording.
Yeah, you're on a speedrun effort.
I am. But yeah, so front engine, front drive. It doesn't work from a physics point of view either.
You are asking the front wheels to do a lot, but I mean, the one argument for front wheel drive is that it's quite predictable.
Yeah, but you can make every other setup really quite predictable as well. And for why I don't like it, it's not a snobbery thing, it's genuine physics. Because when you accelerate, you transfer the weight rearwards. So you're then wanting the wheels that you've unloaded to continue dragging you forward for acceleration.
Yeah.
When you brake, typically, if you're spirited driving, you're braking before you go into a corner, or you're trail braking into a corner. So you're transferring weight forwards, and you're loading up the front wheels to then essentially cope with power transmission, steering, and braking.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And also, when you're accelerating out of a corner, unless you've got a limited slip diff, which 90% of cars don't have from the factory, it's a cold hard fact.
Yeah.
You're also unloading the front inside wheel which is really the one you want to be driving along with the front outside wheel, and you're transferring backwards on an angle. So, I mean, there's a lot that I really don't like about them. And for me, it's just such a flawed platform. I don't like it. And for me, it's not in the contention for being what makes a great driver's car. There are great driver's cars that are front wheel drive, but if I was setting out to make a driver's car, it wouldn't be for me.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more with that. All of the cars that I've had that have been front wheel drive, I've always found them to be quite understeery, and it's annoyed me to various degrees depending on depending on the car. You know, like in like my Volvo, I didn't really expect it to be like the ultimate driver's car. It was, you know, a big heavy Volvo on like kind of shitty tires. It was always going to drive badly. But yeah, other cars have really annoyed me where you're like, it just makes everything a bit worse because it's all happening at the front. You're totally right. It's all about, you aren't distributing the force going through. You're not distributing the force from like interaction with the road to your car evenly across the car. You're distributing pretty much all of it at the front.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. I mean, you have four wheels. So why you would make two of them deal with everything and two of them just kind of follow on behind you, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and it shows you really the fact that a lot of like regular cars, you're never really asking that much of them, so it is kind of okay for the front wheels to be doing everything. But the whole point of, you know, like a good driver's car is it's one that you can ask, you know, everything of, and it can deliver that. It doesn't struggle, you know.
Precisely. And I think to go forward from here, I mean, really, I want to get away from the examples, but there's one we haven't touched on, and that's the one that kind of, for me, works but shouldn't. Because technically, it should have half of the problems of rear-wheel drive and half of the problems of front-wheel drive, because that's usually how life works. But it doesn't actually in this case. Most of the time, it's got the best parts of each.
Yep.
And that is four-wheel drive. So for me, you're talking Imprezas, Evos, the Yaris GR as the most modern example that springs to my mind. RS200 Ford for Group B madness. The Mazda MPS 6.
Yeah, absolutely. But how do you consider the four-wheel drive systems that are kind of what you would maybe call on-demand four-wheel drive? You know, like viscous couplings, etc. You know, where the car senses that it needs to distribute power, but pretty much all the power goes to the front wheels.
It's quite interesting that you brought that up because the Mazda 6 MPS has such a system. And at the time of its release, the Motor Impress lauded it as like a grown-up answer to an Impreza or an Evo. Like you would buy something you would buy if you didn't want to have like the ASBO image that I say ASBO in quotes image of both the Impreza and the Evo. But I drove one and it was a fine car. Wasn't like absolute bleeding edge driver's car material, but certainly was very capable.
Yeah, give you a lot of confidence behind the wheel.
Oh yeah.
I find it funny that you.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
I find it funny that you brought up the fact that like the Subaru Impreza and Evo have like, you know, that kind of ASBO image.
Yeah.
I'd argue like that the Mazda 6 MPS now totally does. Like the amount of those that I've seen, you know, in the classic spec of white with damage, completely black, kind of like chipped alloys, kind of cutting about, you know, maybe got like a little bit of a front splitter, like a little fake carbon fiber front splitter or something like that. You know the spec, heavy tin.
Yeah.
I've seen quite a lot like that. So it's, you know, it's it's not as if it's got any better reputation in my mind than the Evo or the Impreza.
No, that's true. They have fallen into somewhat of a niche owner profile, we'll call it. But I mean, for example, they can drift.
That's pretty cool.
I know this because I made it drift and the salesman shat himself. But also there's videos on YouTube of people generally being hooligans on roundabouts with them. And to be fair, it is good fun.
Is that in the damp?
No, I got a little bit sideways in the dry, and the salesman had to clean the passenger seat when I handed the keys back to him and said I don't want it. But yeah, I mean, it's the same as anything. With enough commitment, you can make anything drift.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, generally speaking, like whether it's a drift or it's just a slide.
I mean, it was opposite lock coming round a corner. So yeah, I mean, it was a drifty slide, we'll call it.
Aye. A slide that you expertly turned into a drift.
Yeah, like it probably the chassis of the vehicle and the electronic nannies of the car did not know what the fuck was going on, but we survived and didn't die, so that's the main thing.
Did they absolutely did they just get so confused and like randomly go on and off?
Oh yeah, the dash was lit up like a Christmas tree for about 45 seconds after it, trying to catch up. So even the little arrow on the sat nav was like half a mile behind at that point. So yeah, no, it was fun. And hand on heart, if you ever get the chance to go hooning in a Mazda 6 MPS that's not yours, take the opportunity because they are good fun.
They are. I will. Is it like a 2.5 in those?
It's a 2.3 turbo, and unfortunately,
of course,
the engines are made of chocolate. Unfortunately. Which was quite a large part of the reason why I didn't end up buying it, because I really liked it. I was really quite keen of it, and then I went home and looked up and I was like, oh, I don't fancy this. There's timing chains and turbos and fucking bottom end problems, and I was like, fuck that. But anyway,
with an unreliable Mazda engine, who would have thought it?
Now that's not a very nice thing to say, because you know I am very keen of a rotary engine, you dick.
I know. I mean, I wasn't just thinking about the rotary engine, although I definitely was. I was also thinking about how you mentioned the was it the diesel? Is it the Skyactiv diesel?
Yes, they're horrible.
Yeah.
You also called the Porsche 911 a fucking beetle. I've not let that one go yet either. But so what I want to know is, we've talked a little bit about cars and chassis. You know, we've touched on what our kind of feelings are on them. What do you think makes those cars a driver's car, though?
For me, what I look for in a car, is something that it's got an engaging drive. Like it, you know, some cars you get in and they don't really encourage you to do anything but kind of like exist in box while you just go wherever you go. You know, you've got a really high seating position, feels like you're driving a bus. It's kind of like it's geared so that you change at like 2,000 RPM and just kind of like potter everywhere in a really grey wash. Whereas other cars kind of like, you know, the kind of car you're driving and you look down at the speed and you're like, oh, right, okay, I'm going faster than I thought I was. Like, it just kind of, it nudges you forward. It says like, oh, you know, why not? Let's just attack this corner. The kind of car that you plan the road ahead and you think, oh, you know, I can move over a little bit. I can get a lovely line through here. You know, I can kind of maintain my speed. Whereas if I'm driving just kind of a product, like I'm not really thinking about that, to be honest. I'm just kind of just driving.
That's fair. So really, it's like, it's almost like, you know what, I'm going to turn off the motorway and exit sooner than I need to, because there's a really nice road there
that is absolutely it. Yeah, that is exactly the feeling. The feeling where you're like, okay, I'm going to take the slightly twistier, less direct route because this car's great and it will make me happy. Like, I will feel good about like driving this around the corners, just kind of enjoying feeling the car grip up, and like just kind of knowing that it's the car's, you know, really capable under your feet.
Yeah, it's the things that make that tangible.
Absolutely, really, yeah, absolutely.
That I think is what a driver's car is, and really for me, it doesn't really come down. I don't think suspension setup has a lot to. I don't think suspension design, has a lot to do with it.
by that, do you mean, whether it's kind of like coilover shock, or it's kind of what are the other ones, like trailing arm? I'm not actually 100%
yeah,
sure. I'm showing my ignorance here.
like the vast majority of vehicles on the road are McPherson strut suspension, which it's not great, it's not bad. Like Imprezas, Evos, Yaris GRs, a lot of BMWs, especially contemporary ones, DC2s, a lot of Hondas, are all this sort of setup.
And that is the lower arm, and
with a ball joint, which is on
yeah,
the hub, and then your hub has a rigid setup on the bottom of the shock.
yeah. And the shock and spring can be separated in that as well.
Yes, they can be, but it's very unusual.
Is it unusual with a McPherson strut? Because like a lot of cars have the shock, the shock on the outside of the, like, at the hub, and then the spring will be like maybe like a little bit further in.
So on a McPherson strut, typically you would have a coilover strut design.
Right, okay.
Where you would have the shock absorber, and then you'd have a spring perch and a top hat, which would then contain the spring over the top of the shock absorber.
Yep.
For me, it is what it is. Like, technically, a dual wishbone front suspension with then multi-link rear suspension is the absolute king of the castle, and that's where you have two wishbones and they both support your hub.
Yeah.
And then your shock absorber, which is usually a coilover shock again, so that it's the spring over the top of the shock, is either attached to the bottom or the top wishbone.
Yep.
And the thing is, you don't tend to get a lot of deflection and weird angles and fucked up kinematics in the angle of your hub, so you can typically keep your camber and your suspension alignment a lot better and more ideal through the full range of suspension travel. Just
I
the way
understand.
the setup works. And the same again on the rear. I mean, to be honest, most rear-wheel drive cars, in fact 99.9% of them, I would go out on a limb, in production are all multi-link rear suspension, which would be all rear-wheel drive cars and most four-wheel drives as well. You used to get like semi-trailing rear arms and stuff. The last one I think that was in production was like the E30 BMW. No, it wasn't. It was E36 or the E46 Compact, because they carried that over a little bit for those. But that's the last time I actually think of that setup being in production in a general mainstream car.
So what's a semi-trailing arm? What's that design?
So it's a suspension arm that's fixed at 2 points essentially on the forward axis, and then on the back it just has the spring and the shock absorber connected. It can be in a strut with the spring over the shock, or it can be two separate ones.
All right, okay, I understand. Yeah.
Multi-link is you have a hub and there's generally 4 arms that will hold it laterally, and then 1 or possibly 2 arms that would hold it on the forward axis to stop it moving forward and backward in the wheel arch, if that makes sense.
Aye, totally.
And for me, that's the gold standard right there. It gives the best ride quality as well, which is something that I think people overlook. Because, see, the kind of best drivers' cars, and I think a distinction to say here as well, is a driver's car isn't necessarily the fastest car on the track either. For me, it would be the most tactile and the most fun car to drive on a track or on a road. Is that good ride quality is absolutely imperative, because it means your suspension is well designed.
Certainly, and especially if you're driving it on the road.
Yeah. And I think really the problem here is a lot of people equate really hard suspension with high performance, but that's not necessarily the case, because people think the suspension is there to absorb bumps, but that's not what the suspension's job is to do. The suspension's job is to push the wheel into the road. It's not to stop the road pushing the wheel. It's the other way around. So the whole reason suspension exists on cars is to keep your wheel in contact with the road. And really your suspension, like your compression and your rebound and all the settings, have to be hard enough to stop you from bottoming out when you go hit a bump, and when you go over a depression in the road, it has to rebound fast enough to push the wheel down into the depression. And then also, when the wheel comes back up out of the depression, it has to have enough resistance on it so that the wheel doesn't leave the ground. Like that, the sweet spot for suspension setup. But a lot of people think the harder it is, the better it is, and it just makes cars horrible to drive.
It does, yeah.
It doesn't have to be an extreme driver's car for it either. I had a red Subaru Impreza WRX for a while, and the suspension setup on that was actually too hard for one of the roads I drove, where you would get insanely choppy braking, and it would lead to a really, really horrible situation where you would go diving into this car, the corner hard on the brakes, and you would get understeer immediately because you were overloading the front wheels with the weight transfer, and also the fact that they're trying to cope with undulations in the road while trail braking into a corner, and then it would almost immediately snap to oversteer as you got round the corner. And it was great fun because you knew it was coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it would have been better with a better suspension setup.
Yeah, totally. You could be too hard.
Yeah. So for me, ride quality. At the same time, it's steering fidelity is the only word I can really pop into my mind with it. Like, because I mean, it doesn't really matter if the steering's light or heavy, but it has to have that adjustability and that tactileness to it. Otherwise, you're just pissing into the wind. And then the same with your brakes. And I think that's really where you are. So I mean, there's definitely, for me at least, there's definitely an advantage to having certain suspension designs, but for me, it's more setup, and then it comes down to those three things: ride quality, steering, and brakes. And I think that's the foundation of a good chassis.
Fair, yeah. That's really, really interesting. Yeah, you've managed to put words to like the kind of feel of a car.
Yeah, and it's something that can actually be quite hard to quantify.
Absolutely, yeah. I was just thinking there, what would I describe what I like about, a car's steering, and all I can think about is that total cliched word of feedback.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't matter, as you say, if the car steering is light or heavy, but as long as you know what's going on through it, that's the most important thing. Because you'll have driven a car with hilariously over assisted electric steering. It just feels so wildly disconnected from what could actually be happening.
yeah. Do you know the thing that immediately pops into my head there? Have you ever driven a Fiat Punto?
No, I actually haven't.
You need to, and see when you're driving it, take it on the motorway and then press the city button. It makes the steering hilariously light. It's actually legitimately, it's a liability if you press that button and somebody's not expecting it. It was my favourite thing to do when I was in college. So we'd jump in somebody's Fiat to go to McDonald's, and I'd just hit the city button out of nowhere, and he'd just steer over the middle of a roundabout. It was fucking quality.
Oh my god. That's terrible.
Yeah, but it is fun. Yeah, man. No, it's really what you say though. That's correct. Like if you don't get a feeling for what the road is doing or what the tire is doing in connection with the road through the wheel, really, it's missed the mark.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's some things as well that, like, I think balance has a lot to do with the steering, but then there's body design as well. Because one thing, and Mazda got this really good with the RX-8, and I think it's got a lot to do with their powertrain design. So Mazda basically put a spine down the centre of the car, and they bolt the differential and the gearbox and everything onto this massive mount, and it's a big, massive steel mount down the centre of the chassis. And then that is then bolted to the car. And it adds a lot of structural rigidity, but it adds it in the places that you want it. which
Yeah.
then means you can then play with the structure of the design of the car to introduce flex that's actually good and beneficial.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Because one thing I always noticed driving the RX-8, you could actually feel what the road was doing and what the car was doing through the seat. So you could actually feel flex in the floor through the seat. You'd have to be paying attention to get it, but you could actually feel it. And it got to the point where, through familiarity with the car, I could actually feel power shifting across the back axle with the LSD that was in it.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
When you have that level of communication, it's so easy to do irresponsible things.
But also, that is what you want from a driver's car, because you're absolutely locked in at that moment. You know, you're so engaged. Like, it's...
Absolutely. And that's the key to a good chassis. It's that engagement with somebody. I don't necessarily think it's the personality. I think it's more to do with design and mechanical feedback than anything.
Can you imagine well, you know, there probably is a few examples of cars that on paper should be great, but actually just feel a little bit numb?
Yeah. The E90, no, actually, that's totally that's a disgusting comment. I absolutely take that back, because I think the E90 is one of the finest driving BMWs out there, to be fair.
Were you just trying to make more enemies?
You know, I said it because I half had a thought, and I was actually thinking the E90 is actually the opposite of this, and then I just started talking about what was in my face. But then I kind of said it, and I was like, do I stick to my guns here and just try and get all the BMW guys to hate us? But no, I won't. It genuinely a really good chassis. One I always thought was a bit naff, and this might make some enemies, was an Evo.
Interesting. What did you not quite take to?
It was, you know how people say you can have too much of a good thing?
Aye.
It was almost a bit of that. I found it too clinical.
Okay, I get you. Yeah. No, that's kind of what I was meaning by, you know, a car that on paper should be a really engaging drive, but it's almost like it's kind of a little bit dull, because it's just it's very competent, but there's no real feedback. And I used that word.
I mean, hey, it's allowed, man. It's a cliche for a reason.
I know. I really didn't want to use the word.
I mean, the feedback was there, right? But it almost took the fun out of it. Admittedly, I've never driven an Evo RS, which is one that doesn't have active yaw control or any of that gubbins. But yeah, it kind of took the fun out of it. It made everything a little bit easy. It's like, just turn the wheel and let the computer take care of it.
Yeah. No, I totally get you.
I much preferred an Impreza. And
a little bit more of a just, you know, go for it and see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, you know, I always thought Imprezas responded really well to my inputs, but that's because I personally feel like I know how to drive an Impreza, whereas a lot of people don't. I think a lot of people try to drive them like an Evo and then are really surprised why they've crashed. But you've got to really grab an Impreza by the fucking neck and almost force the fucking thing to do what you want. There's none of this steering around a corner with your pinky at 2 million miles an hour like you can in an Evo.
You know, I still remember that red Impreza you had, because I remember we went somewhere in it, and I remember you were driving down, it was one of the kind of quieter back roads, and I remember you went into this corner and I was like, fuck, we are going to crash. This is too much into this corner. And I remember you went into it and then you were braking mid-corner, and I was like, this has really impressed me. I did not expect this car to have anywhere near as much grip. But when you were driving it, you were absolutely manhandling that car.
Yeah.
I can totally see that. Like, yeah, you were properly grabbed that car by the horns and were like forcing it to do what you wanted it to do.
Yeah, you've got to really make them do what you want. Like a great example, there's the corners not far from my house on the way to Dumfries. If I go around there at 80, 85, maybe 90, I am absolutely at the limit of my talent on my motorbike. In an Impreza, though, dear God, 110, easy. And just trail brake into the corner, pitch it in, and chop the throttle to get that weight transfer. And as soon as you get that little bit of lift, that little bit of yaw, that's it. Steer her through on the throttle, nice and easy with your steering inputs, and away you go. And you're round it before you even know what's happened.
I mean, at those speeds, you fucking would be.
Yeah. It's literally just make it do what you want, which is actually quite a poignant thing, because it proves the point that a driver's car isn't always a very delicate thing.
No, definitely not. I mean, I think drivers' cars can be kind of like quite cumbersome and raw, and the fact that what makes them engaging is that you actually do have to manhandle them. They're a proper workout. They're not like a kind of like a little scalpel slicing through the crowd. They're like a big, massive bruiser.
Yeah, and that is the thing. I think, it's the more podcasts we do, the more I'm kind of realizing and coming to the conclusion that the answer is never the same, never one thing.
No, absolutely not.
So, I like a delicate front rear setup, but then I also like an Impreza. Then I also really like an MR2. So there's a lot of different answers to what makes a good driver's car. So
absolutely, and I mean, it depends what you usually drive in too. Because like, if I lived anywhere, even like if I lived anywhere too far north, I would definitely be in a 4-wheel drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not really considering the UK. I was like, if you lived in like, quite northern Europe or something like that, if I did live somewhere that would warrant it, I would definitely always be in a 4-wheel drive of some kind.
Fair enough. No, that's a fair point.
But like, as fun as rear and rear of all kinds can be in the snow and ice, if I had to like every fucking day be like, right, what thing is going to take me by surprise and I'll have to be right on top of on this drive? It's fine when you're like, all right, okay, let's go out and have some fun, and you expect it, but when you're just trying to get about, it can be really tiring.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, and it's a point I've made before in the show as well. And it's like, big power wheel drive cars aren't really all that fun to drive all the time.
No, they can be a bit of a faff.
Yeah, it gets a bit boring just trying to avoid death constantly.
giving it very, very little throttle, really slowly.
Yeah. I mean, the application of man foot can create legends, but improper application of man foot creates gravestones. And there's a time and a place, and I don't think like a 1,000 brake horsepower daily driver in rear wheel drive is just a horrible idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, with that in mind, I have two questions for you before I kind of come to the end question, I think. Is front rear even the ultimate setup? And what do you think is actually the best layout for driving? And by driving, I mean spirited drives on a good B road or on a decent track.
Okay, there's a fair bit to unpack there. So, I mean, I don't think that engine in the front, drive to the rear is the ultimate kind of driving package. I think it's good, very, very good for everyday application, but I wouldn't say it's the ultimate setup. Thinking about it, mid 4-wheel drive, that's that does seem like quite a good setup. It's got a lot of advantages.
Yeah.
You could get good weight distribution. You can put the gearbox up front, engine in the middle.
Yeah, man. That is actually quite cool.
I don't know, is there any examples of... Well, there must be, because there's all of the Lamborghinis will be 4-wheel drive mid-engine.
Yeah, but I think they're all... I don't know, Porsche Turbo is probably the closest to what you just said. Gearbox, and then transfer drive going to the front. Transfer case going to the front, and then your two drive shafts going to the outside.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, actually. The more I think about it, the more I realise that quite a lot of cars are now 4-wheel drive, or at least offered in a 4-wheel drive option.
Yeah.
And I can definitely see the benefits. Like, it does make a lot of sense, 4-wheel drive. You get all of that extra grip and control, and then you can do some fancy stuff with the car electronics to, like, improve the exactness and the control that you have.
Yeah.
It does. That's when you start to get into that kind of losing the rawness and the maybe a bit of the engagement. I'm trying to think which cars would maybe be a bit more accessible and have that sort of layout as well.
Yeah. So one thing that pops into my mind is the BMW M5, not the current gen, but the last one, where it basically came with selectable four-wheel drive. You could have it totally rear-wheel drive, or you could then put like up to 50% of the power to the front wheels.
Yeah.
But then for me, we run into the other problem, which is what you just said, where you lose some of that rawness. Because
I think you do, yeah.
Because one thing I think, now, there's a lot of different types of rawness. Certainly, the Impreza, like the example we gave, the RX-8, the 235i, they're all raw, but in very different ways. They all have a visceralness to the drive experience, but all in a different facet, really. My God, this is laden with cliches.
It's so hard to talk about without kind of falling into the pitfalls of a cliche.
It is. So, do we think on that for a good driving setup, rawness in some ways has to be part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer the car to feel a little bit raw. I want to feel like I am doing something. Sometimes when the car is it's overly capable, you get this feeling that this car could totally do this with or without me. I could be a baby and the car would be absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Whereas when they feel a little bit more raw, you actually do feel that your decisions are actually impacting what's happening. And that's an important part of driving as well, like actually feeling like you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So really, we need to have a bit of rawness. The feedback has to be there, which is kind of the brake feel, ride quality, steering fidelity, flex in the right places sort of thing.
Yeah, because I mean, you can to a degree feel the car move a little bit when you're driving it. As you were saying in the RX-8, you could kind of feel it under the seat.
Yeah. So rawness, fidelity. I'm just trying to avoid saying feedback. And what else? I mean, it has to be three things.
Balance is really good. Now, balance is important.
I would say adjustability as well, although that's kind of hand in hand with balance, because if a car's really well balanced, it tends to be really quite adjustable, like on the throttle.
Yeah.
So really,
you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're totally right. It just feels good when you can find that exact point of balance with a car as well.
Yeah, and like the GT86, for example, is really good for this because it has that balance where it just yaws in its own in its own footprint. It like moves around a little bit, and it really does encapsulate that quite well.
Yeah, totally. The more I've been thinking about the GT86, because we've brought it up on this podcast, the more I've been, really thinking about the GT86, and maybe it would be quite nice to
pick up a crashed one and do a project.
Yeah, or maybe just a really, really ropey one. Depends how bad the crash damage is.
I mean, yeah. I'll have a look on Copart tomorrow.
Don't, man, I've got nowhere to fucking put it.
I've got face. Oh man, I told you I am.
You're an enabler, man.
I am an enabler.
100%. Yeah. Bad dude.
Yeah. So like, hit list then. For me, three things is an acceptable hit list. So feedbacks / fidelity, balance / adjustability, and rawness or some like visceral feeling to the chassis itself.
Yeah. You've got to feel engaged in the driving process.
So with that in mind, what do you reckon best captures that as a layout? Or do you think there is a single layout? There maybe isn't.
I'm really torn. I'm really torn between just your traditional front-engined rear drive or mid-engined rear drive, because they are, from personal experience, the two layouts I've had the most fun in. I didn't find four-wheel drive as fun as often as I find rear-wheel drive, just in general. And I think for everyday use, I think I would say, for on the roads, actually, just normal driving, normal rubbish roads with their weird kind of like ups and downs and inconsistencies and crap camber and stuff like that. I would say front engine rear drive. It's maybe just a touch more predictable than mid rear can sometimes be.
Yeah, that's really fair. And I think my answer is pretty much identical, although I'm not sold on the front rear. I'm 100% certain, although I have had many a good time in a Subaru Impreza, many a good time in many a good Subaru Impreza, I'm convinced rear-wheel drive is the way to go when we're talking about just a pure driver's car. And that without some sort of condition, be it poor weather or poor surface or road top contaminants like cow shit or something, cut grass, that you're not always necessarily faster. Maybe Joe Bloggs would be faster in a four-wheel drive compared to somebody else in a rear-wheel drive. But if you actually know what you're doing, I think you're always going to be faster in a rear-wheel drive car because you don't have the weight penalty.
Yeah, or there'll probably not be, not that much in it, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's not like four-wheel drive outperforms everywhere.
No, definitely not.
I would agree with that. Like, sometimes I wonder if I should have looked for like a cross-drive version of my car, but then I think, I don't really know. I'm not really sure about that. First of all, I don't actually know what four-wheel drive system is, what kind it is, whether it's actually like a proper four-wheel drive system or it's not.
Oh, it's proper. It's not like front bias or anything.
Yeah, totally. I mean, because that would make sense considering the base car is just like a rear-wheel drive car.
Yeah, essentially all they do is slap a transfer case on and put a drive shaft to the front.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more to go wrong.
That was also something I kind of contemplated. And it's not like it's a fucking rocket ship. It's powerful, but it's not powerful enough to think that I really do need four-wheel drive for this.
Yeah.
It's not like your 1,000 horsepower R35.
Yeah, definitely. Like there's no need for the vast majority of people to have four-wheel drive other than absolute fucking laziness in the snow.
I mean, it doesn't even help that much in the snow. It's better just to have some decent tires.
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, I think that the ultimate ultimate configuration is front-engined rear-wheel drive, with the condition that I also love mid-engined rear-wheel drive.
That's fair, dude.
If all roads were racetrack smooth, I would say it would be the mid. Yeah, definitely mid-engined, but they're not.
No, they're not. They're not even close to all roads being racetracks.
No.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement here then. So, well, partial agreement, but not any form of disagreement either, because from where I'm sitting, rear-wheel drive is king.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to be like, actually, I think you'll find front-wheel drive is the optimum driving dynamics for a car. I don't think anyone's like kind of that dedicated to front-wheel drive or that kind of delirious.
Thomas, my dear friend, have you met the internet?
Oh, God. Yeah, I forgot about that. I totally forgot about that.
Oh,
come on. Like, front-wheel drive can be good, but it runs out of ability much quicker than rear-wheel or even four-wheel drive. You just need, as we talked about earlier, you need to distribute those forces more equally to get the most out of everything.
Yeah, and like, really, front-wheel drive drivers' cars for me come down to this. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, I can go out and murder 10 people tomorrow. I probably shouldn't, though.
And you won't, yeah?
And I won't. No, just to say that, yeah, I also won't. But, you can achieve the same effect much better with rear-wheel drive, or not much better necessarily. Well, of course, much better, but also much easier because you're not having to beat the laws of physics into submission.
Absolutely. Like, all of those hot hatches with they'll have like really quite fancy, electronic diffs in the front of them to help promote kind of like oversteer and make the car less kind of understeery in general.
Yeah, like the Mark II Focus RS with its Revo knuckle, which, newsflash, was an invention by Peugeot.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Peugeot 407 came out with the same idea as well because it had a diesel engine. Focus RS guys don't like it when I point that out to them.
I can understand why. Yeah, but it's kind of standard for your hot front wheel drive hatch to be to have a diff to like kind of help manage that, and I just always feel that rear wheel drive's maybe just a touch more honest. Like you're getting that more honestly, like more mechanically honestly than it have to be kind of computer induced.
Yeah. I mean, like the fact that you have so many BMs that are like I touched on earlier, the E90. The E90 drives far nicer than any commuter spec car has any right to. Like there's no need for everyone that bought an E90 to have one of the finer chassis of that era at their fingertips because 90% of them didn't know what to do with it. Like it's a total waste of time by the engineers at BMW, for example.
But the people that do appreciate their work.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is like the contemporary front wheel drive cars of that time, and I'm not talking sports cars, I'm just talking run of the mill things, don't hold a candle to it. And they're in the same segment as like a 318D or a 316D, for example. They are a competitor to it. Admittedly, probably at a different price point, and they're not rear wheel drive. But when you're looking at it in terms of fun for a commuter car, it doesn't come close. Like, and when you take it to extremes, you see the same. Like, there's a reason Lotus for the longest of time did nothing but rear wheel drive. The same with Ferrari. The same with Lamborghini is a bit of an outlier, but then Volkswagen Audi Group bought it and over-engineered everything to the point it broke.
Yeah, so, Lamborghini became four-wheel drive when Audi bought them.
Yeah, but I mean, Zonda, for example, not Zonda, Pagani. Jumper, Ariel, Ascari. They're all these absolute top-level cars. They're all rear-wheel drive.
Yeah.
And it's not by accident either.
I think it just works the best for most types of situations.
It does that. And with that, Tom, I think we've kind of got to the epitome of the question there, and that is what makes a good chassis and how to make the foundation of greatness, because that is arguably this is the foundation of all great drivers' cars, is that they're a good chassis.
Yeah, it's the place you need to start.
Definitely.
How many fantastic engines have been languished in a kind of wallowy chassis?
Well, that's a question for next time, Tom.
I look forward to it.
Smashing. Right, well, on that note, thank you for listening, people. If you've enjoyed what you heard, by all means, give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. Don't know what happened there. I've been developing a stutter of late, mate, and it's came out of nowhere, and I don't actually know what's happening. I think I might have fucking destroyed my brain or something. I don't know what I've done. It's just out of nowhere, I'm developing a stutter. Sorry. So yeah, thank you for listening. As I said, give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. And yeah, feel free to comment. Let us know what you think the ultimate chassis setup is.
Yeah, we would be interested to hear people's thoughts on, what makes a good driver's car to them. Give us some examples. Tell us what you think.
And we don't want to hear that it's all Honda's this and Honda's that, though.
Yeah. Fair warning, though. If you say it's front-wheel drive, we'll probably not read it.
Well, we'll read it. We'll just judge you. But in all seriousness, no. Please do comment. We love the engagement. It's really good, and it helps us get a feel for if we're going in the right direction or not. And on top of that, leave us a review. Remember, 5 stars or nothing, folks.